I guess in what aspect, right? Because, I mean, I don't want to sound all hippie-ish, but I definitely do think that I like to, as I'm sure you've noticed, talk to people. And I really do enjoy talking to strangers. So I don't really have one person as like a mentor, because I feel like when you have that, you get like a lot of bias you don't notice. So I used to have that like freshman year. I used to have one or two economics professors who I was like, oh my god, you guys are so cool. And then I took a law and economics class, and I was like, I hate law and economics, but I really like the professor. Like, lessons learned, don't just... Because the problem is when you really look up to someone, it's the same reason I took Dev Econ, but it turns out I love Dev Econ, so it's fine. When you take classes with professors or you start putting people in mentor positions, what happens is, whether, at least in my personality, you start thinking like, oh, I think they're really successful and really cool. Maybe I should also try to be like them. And I try to actively avoid that, because I think it's only by sort of talking to and exposing yourself to a lot of people, even people you don't agree with. So, for example, my friend's uncle is it's the energy consulting firm who hired the Massachusetts senator to be a part of their consultant, and there's that huge scandal, and then they got banned, and anyway, I met him, and he's a Republican, and I don't see eye to eye, but I learned a lot of really cool things, and really good advice, and I think, for me, it's better to have a lot of people mentor you than have, like, one particular person. Especially the more, like, polarized the better, which is something I've realized.
More polarized in the sense of, like, more diverse points of view.
So in the sense of, I know that as a woman of color, I'm always tempted to be like, okay, I should find, like, Ayanna Priestley, right? Like the mayor of London, like Boston or whatever. And whilst that is helpful, I think it's actually more helpful to find mentors who haven't had the same experiences as you. Because I know what it's like to grow up being a woman of color and face prejudice and blah, 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 blah. But I don't know what it's like to grow up as a white male with privilege, or grow up as an American, or grow up as someone in a different generation, right? So I think talking to those people, you get a different perspective that you don't already have. And I think that's a lot more valuable than have someone else reaffirm, like, yeah, it does suck to be a woman of color, because people make assumptions, which you already kind of knew. I mean, it's nice to have reinforcement sometimes, but I think it's a lot more valuable to have different perspectives.
Great. Is there a class or experience you've had while a student at Northeastern that you feel will have a lasting influence on you?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite two of my favorite classes are Intro to Logic, which I took freshman year, which I think really helped me understand a lot of just, like, horrible logical fallacies I would do on, like, a day-to-day basis. Like, this whole idea of, like, strawmanning someone was something where I was like, oh, that's why that felt wrong. Got it. And the second class I took was interdisciplinary seminar, I want to say. It's basically scientific approaches to philosophy, which was one of my favorite classes. And I'm sort of glad that, so I chose to voluntarily join the honors program second year, mostly because, and I'll totally admit this, I have pushy Asian parents sometimes. And they're like, why aren't you in the honors program? I was like, I don't know, because I don't want to be forced to take classes I don't want to take. Which in its essence is what the honors program is. Not that that's a bad thing, but because if you're an economics major, apart from micro and macro, which I already did at that point, there are no other, like, honors economics, so you're just like, I guess I have to take other classes. So I ended up taking, like, anthropology, and through that, and that second class was scientific approaches to philosophy, and I definitely think it's left a lasting impact in the sense that it helped me critically examine things that I took for a given. Like, I will always remember my professor being like, how do you know there's a sun? And I'm like, well, I've been taught there. Like, he was like, how do you know there's gravity? And I was like, it's a really good point. And he's like, yeah, because you believe someone else, and everyone else tells you there's gravity, you're going to believe it. And then he made us understand, like, that's why people thought the earth was flat, because appeal to authority is a legitimate way we learn things. We also talked a lot about what reality means, and I was convinced for 2 weeks that we were living in a simulation. I think that's how powerful his lectures were, because I was like, oh no! Like, particles don't have a, like, property, so we were looking at, it was the same type of particle. It's this idea of, kind of like Schrodinger's cat, where particles don't have properties until someone observes them, and the mere fact that it's the double slit experiment where just by observing something you change its outcome, and then I was like, wow, So I think I will definitely carry that with me, if not the sort of main parts of the class, which is that you should question authority, question things you know, and really question everything you take for given.
What are your career plans as you graduate?
Ooh. I will be honest when I say I thought I knew. Right now I do not. I think I know what I want to do as a like in general in life, but I'm unsure of the specifics. So right now I have a couple of interviews and I'm in the application process. So either I'm going to work for the British Civil Service, or maybe the MIT's Poverty Lab as a research associate, or maybe maybe go back to grad school. I haven't figured it out yet. I definitely know that one of the things I enjoy doing is sort of really helping people, as cheesy as that sounds, but also being able to use my sort of academic knowledge and a little bit of my research skills. So right now I'm looking into really sort of probably the nonprofit and intergovernmental organization type of role. Okay. But in terms of like my dream future career goals, I probably want to get into politics, which is something I didn't think I wanted to do.
Interesting.
In what capacity, do you know?
In the sense of, dream job would probably be Chancellor of the Exchequer for the UK. But also just to sort of, not just, because one of the things I realized and really love about politics is I really, firstly, just love getting out there and talking to people, and I guess I've always been committed to this idea of representing people, and I just never put two and two together. But I guess I really sort of stepped up to this sort of role because, and this is going to sound really sort of cheesy, but like, it's more like a weird Donald Trumpian effect where you realize like, because I love President Obama, right? But you have this sort of sense of intimidation where you're like, oh my God, he went to Harvard and he's a law professor in constitutional law. And then you hear Donald Trump and you're like, oh cool, he doesn't know how to spell words. And you realize that in a weird way, even though Trump is really elite, he's sort of broken down the barrier of the educational elite, which is this idea of, I never really thought I was like qualified enough to be a politician or wealthy enough. And then I was like, the heck with it. If I have the right intentions and I'm dedicated and this is really what I want to do with my life, then it's better to try and fail than to just sit around being like, if only. So, yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
So, have those plans changed since you started college?
Oh, drastically.
It sounds like.
Yeah, when I started, I will totally admit, when I started freshman year, and I'm sure you can hear it if you go back to my clips, is I thought I had like a very good idea of who I was and what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to get to college, I'm here for a very expensive piece of paper, I'm going to get this degree, go into investment banking, make a lot of money, get into private equity, retire by the time I'm 40, maybe buy an island. Like, that was my plan. I was like, I'm done, I'm cool. And I think while I was here, I learned a lot about who I actually was, right? Like, had a lot of cognitive dissonance, not gonna lie, about the values I hold and the actions I was taking. And I think that college made me realize that there's more to life than, cheesily enough, money and, power and just, like, going on this little ladder, right? Because that's one of the, pitfalls of being, like, academically gifted or whatever from, like, a young age. Like, you're the valedictorian, you do all these XYZ clubs, right? And then you just sort of look at things as hoops to jump to get to a place, and you always take the beaten path. And it's only at college I realized, like, okay, there are other forms of what it means to be successful and what it means to be worthwhile. And I realized that even though I got paid pretty well in my second co-op, we were 6 of us in Sydney, and I was the only paid co-op. But I was looking at what, like, the other co-ops were doing, and they're working on the Peace Index and public policy and fighting terrorism. And I was like, that's so much cooler. All I do is get yelled at by rich people who are like, where's my 100 million? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I think one of the wake-up calls I had is I got a call at like 2 a.m. on a Friday night. And obviously because it's a Friday night, I'm stressed out. I'm out. I'm having a few beers or whatever. And I get this call, and they're like, hey, Jay, there's $100 million missing. And I'm like, oh. And then I just had the most sobering moment in my life of, this could be the next 20 years of my life, and I didn't want that.
Yeah.
Right? I want what I want to do matter, but at the same time, I want to be able to live life in a sort of meaningful way.
And how well prepared do you feel to embark on your career plans?
Oof. I mean, really cheesy and optimistic, but I genuinely think that my experiences here at Northeastern have prepared me well, right? So I have my formal education. I know how to do research. I've definitely have an interdisciplinary aspect. I've lived abroad. I've studied abroad. I've made a heck of a lot of contacts, which I think is really useful. I did things I never thought I would do. I went to Congress to present policies. I was in the Husky Startup Challenge, and there's just so many things. Like Northeastern really encouraged me to push myself out of my comfort zone and sort of embrace the unknown. And in that sense, I feel prepared in the sense of anything that life throws at me, I feel kind of ready for it, because I know that regardless what you do, and you'll always feel scared and terrified. I think it's about learning to get past that and seeing the opportunities present in whatever comes your way.
So as a last thing, we want to talk about your participation in the study itself.
Yeah, sure.
So why did you initially decide to participate?
I think I initially decided to participate, and I'll be totally honest, it's because I was like, there were things about this university that really bothered me, and then I asked myself, like, oh, cool, if something bothers you, speak up. You can't just mutter to yourself quietly. That's not how things get changed. As to why I continued on with the studies, I realized it's like a really good way. It's kind of, it benefits me in the sense of, I really like reflecting and sort of working on myself. It's one of my things. And I realized this is like a formal way to do that. I mean, when I talk to you guys, not only do I get to obviously be like, cool, these are all the things I've done, and here's some feedback or whatever, but it's also a good way for me to also have two other people who I can visually see or hear, like, oh, I've definitely changed from last year me, and I've changed so much from like me 4 years ago. And I think it's incredibly gratifying to have that feedback and to literally track your progress in life or in your academic career. That's kind of why I did it.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Well, that is